Don't touch her. The voice came sharp, controlled, but edged with something dangerous. Daniel Carter had just stepped out of his car, his attention only half on the scene ahead. Another freezing Chicago night. Another figure slumped on church steps, the kind of thing he had trained himself not to linger on. But then he saw her. A young black woman crouched over his mother, her hands moving quickly, leaning in close. One hand disappearing briefly near the inside of his mother's coat, where a leather wallet was partially visible. From where he stood, it didn't look like help. It looked like someone taking advantage of a vulnerable woman in the dark, someone trying to take what didn't belong to her. And in that instant, something cold and protective snapped into place. Maya Williams didn't turn. Her hands were already working, instinct before thought, tucking the heavy wool coat tighter around the older woman's frame, pressing warmth back into a body that had nearly gone still. "She's freezing," Maya said quietly, more to the woman than anyone else. "Stay with me. Just stay with me." The wind cut through the street like a blade, carrying the sharp scent of lake air and snow. Most people had already passed by without slowing. Maya had almost been one of them. She had just finished a double shift cleaning rooms in a North Shore mansion, then serving late-night customers at a diner. Her feet throbbed. Her hands were numb. Her mind had been fixed on rent, on her mother's medication, on how to make it through another week without falling behind. And then she saw the woman, curled in on herself on the steps of Street Anthony's church. Thin coat, no gloves, no hat, her stillness too deep to be rest. Maya slowed, then stopped. That quiet pull in her chest, the one she had learned not to ignore, tightened until it left her no choice. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" she had asked, lowering herself beside her. The woman's eyes opened slowly, clear but distant. "I'm fine," she whispered. Maya nodded, not believing her for a second. Then she took off her coat. No hesitation, no calculation. Now that coat wrapped the woman completely, swallowing her small frame, trapping the only warmth either of them had. And Maya, left in a thin sweater, felt the cold begin to creep in, slow and unforgiving. "Step back," Daniel said again, stepping closer now, his voice lower, harder. Maya didn't move. "I said step back." A hand reached for her arm. This time she pulled away, firm but controlled. "No," she said. Not loud, not emotional, just certain. Daniel's eyes hardened. "I saw what you were doing," he said. "Whatever you took, put it back." Maya finally turned her head slightly, just enough to look at him from the corner of her eye. There was no panic there, no guilt, just a quiet disbelief. "Excuse me?" she said. "The wallet," he continued, his tone flat, precise. "You think I didn't see it?" For a second, the only sound was the wind scraping down the street. Then Maya let out a short breath, not quite a laugh, not quite frustration. "I wasn't taking anything," she said. "I was making sure it didn't fall out." She reached carefully, slowly, and adjusted the edge of the woman's coat again, revealing the wallet still tucked safely inside, exactly where it had been. "If it drops out here," she added, "it's gone in 5 minutes." The explanation was simple, too simple. Daniel didn't respond immediately. The picture in his head, the one he had formed in that first instant, didn't match what he was seeing now. But he wasn't ready to let it go. "Get away from her," he said, though the edge in his voice had shifted, just slightly. The woman's hand lifted weakly, catching Maya's wrist. "She helped me," she said softly. That stopped him. Not completely, but enough. Daniel crouched beside his mother, his expression tightening as he took in the details he had missed before. The unnatural stillness, the pale tint to her lips, the way she held onto that coat, like it was the only thing keeping her present. "Mother," he said, quieter now. "I'm all right," she murmured, but she wasn't. Anyone could see that. His gaze moved back to Maya, slower this time, to her bare hands, to the thin sweater that did nothing against the cold, to the fact that she had nothing left because she had given it away. The narrative shifted, not fully, but enough to unsettle him. He stood, reaching into his coat, pulling out his wallet. "Name your price," he said. The words sounded less certain now, but they still came out the same way. Clean. Controlled. Automatic. Maya shook her head. I didn't help her for money. Everyone helps for something. Not this, she said quietly. Maya. A pause settled between them, heavier than the cold. You're cold, he said. I'll be fine. You won't. I've been worse. That answer didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded lived. Daniel studied her again. Longer this time. The suspicion hadn't disappeared, but it no longer held the same weight. Slowly, he put the wallet away. What's your name? Maya hesitated for a fraction of a second. Maya Williams. He repeated it under his breath, as if fixing it somewhere permanent. Maya Williams. His mother's hand reached out again, brushing Maya's fingers. Thank you, she said. Maya nodded once. Get her warm, she said. Soon. Then she stepped back. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and biting. But she didn't react. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't wait. She turned and walked away, disappearing down the block. Her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her figure fading into the dark Chicago night. Daniel watched her go, something unsettled lingering beneath his usual certainty. For a moment, just a moment, he realized how quickly he had judged her, and how close he had come to being completely wrong. And somehow, that stayed with him longer than it should have. Daniel Carter did not sleep that night. He told himself it was because of the cold, because of the interruption, because his schedule had been thrown off by something inconvenient and unnecessary. But even as he stood in the quiet of his penthouse, looking out over the frozen stretch of Chicago's skyline, he knew that wasn't true. It was the way she had looked at him, not afraid, not impressed, just unmoved. That didn't happen, not in his world. By morning, the city had returned to its usual rhythm, cars cutting through slush, people hurrying with their heads down, life continuing as if nothing had happened. But inside the Carter estate on the North Shore, things had shifted in a way that no one could quite name yet. Evelyn Carter sat by the window in a thick wool shawl, a cup of tea untouched in her hands. The house was warm, too warm, in fact, but she still held on to the coat. Maya's coat. It hung loosely around her shoulders now, out of place among the polished wood, the curated art, the quiet wealth that filled every corner of the room. Daniel noticed it immediately. You should change, he said, stepping into the room, his tone controlled, almost neutral. You'll be more comfortable. Evelyn didn't move. I am comfortable, she replied. A pause. Daniel walked further in, setting his phone down on the table, his eyes lingering on the coat again. That's not yours. No, she said softly. It isn't. Another silence settled between them. Then, after a moment, she added, She gave it to me. Daniel exhaled slowly. Yes, he said. I'm aware. His voice carried something restrained now, not irritation. Not quite, but something close to it. You almost let her walk away thinking you were a thief, Evelyn said. That landed. Daniel's jaw tightened, just slightly. I responded to what I saw. You responded to what you assumed. Their eyes met. For a brief second, something old passed between them, something rooted deeper than the conversation itself. Daniel looked away first. I handled it, he said. She wasn't harmed. Evelyn let out a quiet breath, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. That's not the point. He didn't answer, because he knew she was right, and because he didn't like it. Across the room, one of the house staff moved quietly, placing a tray of breakfast items on the table before stepping back into the background. As invisible as she had been trained to be, Evelyn watched her go. Then she looked back at her son. What's her name? She asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. Maya Williams. He hadn't meant to remember it so clearly, but he did. Evelyn repeated it once, as if testing how it felt. Maya Williams. She works 2 jobs, Daniel added, almost without thinking. No criminal record. Lives alone. Sends money to family out of state. The words came out clean. Efficient. Like a report. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. You already looked into her. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then, simply, yes. Why? This time, he hesitated. Not long, but long enough. Because I don't like unknown variables, he said. Evelyn studied him for a moment. Then she set the cup of tea down. Untouched. She gave me her coat, she said again. Her only coat. Daniel didn't argue with that, because he had seen it. He had seen the thin sweater, the bare hands, the way she had stood there, shaking slightly but refusing to step back. That doesn't mean she didn't have an angle, he said. Even as he said it, the words felt weaker than they should have. Evelyn caught it. No, she said quietly. It means you're not used to people who don't. The room went still. Outside, a car passed, tires crunching over frozen pavement. Inside, something shifted subtle, but undeniable. Daniel turned, walking toward the window, his reflection faint against the glass. I offered to compensate her, he said. She refused. Of course she did. He glanced back. Evelyn's expression had softened, but there was something firm beneath it now. Not everything is a transaction, Daniel. If you believe that kindness should never be measured in dollars, take a moment to like this story and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, because you never know. Someone just a few miles away might be quietly watching this same moment with you. He didn't answer, because in his world, it was, or at least, it had always been. Evelyn reached up, pulling the coat tighter around herself. It was warm, she said, almost to herself. Not just the fabric. Daniel watched her. For a moment, he saw something he hadn't allowed himself to look at in a long time. Vulnerability, not weakness, just age, time, the kind of quiet fragility that no amount of money could insulate forever. And the image from the night before returned sharp, uninvited. Maya kneeling beside her, not asking questions, not waiting for permission, just acting. He turned away again. I'll have someone send her a replacement, he said. Something appropriate. Evelyn shook her head. No, the word was soft, but final. Daniel frowned slightly. Mother, I don't want a replacement, she said. I want the person who gave it to me. That stopped him, not because he didn't understand the words, but because he did, and he wasn't sure he liked where they were leading. She's not part of this household, he said. She's not. She's human, Evelyn interrupted gently, and she saw me when no one else did. Silence. Heavy now. Deliberate. Then, after a moment, she added, Bring her here. Daniel's expression hardened. That's not necessary. It is to me. He shook his head once. You don't know anything about her. Evelyn smiled faintly. I know enough. He let out a slow breath, running a hand over the back of his neck. This isn't how things are done. Evelyn looked at him, really looked this time. That's exactly why it should be. The words hung in the air. Uncomfortable, unavoidable. Daniel didn't respond, but something in his posture shifted. Not agreement. Not yet, but not dismissal either. Across the room, the staff remained silent, invisible witnesses to a conversation that would have consequences far beyond this moment. Evelyn leaned back slightly in her chair, the coat still wrapped around her like something she refused to let go of. Daniel, she said softly. He looked at her. For once, she continued, don't decide what someone is worth before you meet them. Another pause, longer this time. Then Daniel nodded once, a small movement, but enough. I'll find her, he said. Evelyn smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just certain. And as Daniel reached for his phone, already thinking through the fastest way to locate Maya Williams, he realized something he hadn't expected. This wasn't about the coat anymore, and whatever came next was not going to fit into the world he thought he understood. Maya Williams woke before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because her body had learned long ago that rest was a luxury that didn't last. The apartment was still dark, the kind of quiet that pressed in on you if you let it. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold that had followed her home the night before still sitting in her bones. Without the coat, it had been worse than usual. The wind had cut straight through her sweater, and by the time she reached her building, her hands had gone numb enough that she had fumbled twice trying to get her key into the lock. She pushed herself up now, wrapping her arms around herself as she crossed the small room. The radiator clanked half-heartedly in the corner, doing its best, but not quite enough. She turned on the kitchen light. It flickered once before settling. Coffee. That was the first step. Always. As it brewed, she stood by the sink, looking out over the narrow street below. Chicago in the early morning had a different face, quieter, almost honest. No polished edges, no pretense, just people trying to get through another day. Her reflection in the glass caught her eye. She looked older than 28, not dramatically, just in the small ways that added up tired eyes, a tension in her shoulders that never quite went away. She reached for her phone, scrolling through missed notifications. A message from her mother. Late. She opened it. Don't forget your gloves, baby. It's getting colder. Maya let out a soft breath, something between a laugh and something heavier. Yeah, she murmured under her breath. I know. She didn't text back right away. She rarely did in the mornings. It was easier to keep moving than to sit with the feeling that came with those messages, the distance, the responsibility, the quiet understanding that no matter how hard she worked, it was never quite enough. By 7, she was out the door. Same routine, same streets, same rhythm. The bus ride into the North Shore blurred into a sequence of familiar stops and faces she didn't know but recognized anyway. She adjusted the thin jacket she had pulled from the back of her closet, something lighter, something she hadn't worn since early fall. It wasn't enough, but it was what she had. By the time she stepped into the estate, the contrast hit her the way it always did. Warmth. Immediate. Controlled. The kind that wrapped around you without asking anything in return. The floors gleamed. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and something citrus. Everything in its place. Everything deliberate. Maya nodded once to the house manager as she stepped in, already moving toward her assigned tasks. She kept her head down. She always did. It made things easier. People expected less when you didn't give them a reason to look twice. She had just started in the West Wing when she felt it. Not a sound. Not a movement. Just awareness. The kind that told you someone was watching. She turned slightly, and there he was. Daniel Carter stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that wasn't relaxed at all. He had been there long enough to observe. That much was clear. Maya straightened slowly. Not defensive, not submissive, just present. You're early, he said. His voice carried easily in the quiet space. I start at 7, she replied. It's 7:02. A beat. Not confrontation. Just fact. Something flickered in his expression so quick most people wouldn't have noticed it. But Maya did. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a request. She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. They moved down the hallway together, their footsteps soft against the polished floor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel stopped near one of the large windows overlooking the back garden. The snow had settled overnight, clean and untouched. He turned to face her. You left without your coat, he said. Maya shrugged slightly. Didn't seem like I needed it more than she did. The answer came easily. Too easily. Like she hadn't thought about it twice. Daniel studied her. Again. That same feeling something not fitting into the system he trusted. You should have taken the money, he said. It would have been practical. Maya met his gaze. Calm. Unshaken. Not everything is about what's practical. There it was again. That quiet resistance. Not loud. Not aggressive. But immovable. Daniel exhaled slowly. My mother wants to see you. That caught her off guard. Not visibly, but inside. Something shifted. Why? She asked. Because you helped her. I already did that. She wants to thank you properly. Maya's jaw tightened slightly. She already did. Silence settled between them again. Different this time. He watched her carefully now. Not just observing, but measuring. Not for weakness. For something else. You think this is a transaction, she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he did. Or at least, he had. I think, he said slowly, that people don't do things like that without expecting something in return. Maya held his gaze. Then you haven't been paying attention. The words landed clean. No edge. No disrespect. Just truth. The way she saw it. Daniel felt it. Not as offense. As disruption. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maya spoke again. I have work to do. It wasn't dismissal. It wasn't permission. It was simply a statement of priority. Daniel nodded once. You'll come, he said. Another pause. Then, please. That was new. Subtle, but unmistakable. Maya noticed it, and that, more than anything else, made her hesitate. Finally, she nodded. Fine. He stepped aside, giving her space to move past him. But as she walked by, he spoke again. Maya. She stopped, just enough to acknowledge him. I was wrong last night, he said. The words were measured, controlled, but real. Maya didn't turn around. Yeah, she said quietly. You were? Then she kept walking. And for the first time, in a long time, Daniel Carter stood still in his own house, watching someone walk away from him without hesitation, without fear, without asking for anything, and realized that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be simple. Maya didn't go to Evelyn Carter right away. She finished her work first. That was who she was. Whatever was asked of her, whatever shifted around her, she moved through it in order. Steady, controlled, one task at a time. The hallway had to be done. The guest room linens had to be replaced. The kitchen surfaces had to be wiped down before noon. It was routine. Structure. The only thing that kept everything else from unraveling. But even as her hands moved, her mind didn't settle the way it usually did. It kept circling back to the same thing. His voice when he said please. That didn't belong to a man like Daniel Carter. Not in any world she understood. By late morning, the house had quieted. Staff moved like shadows. Conversations kept low. Everything running on a system designed to make sure nothing ever felt out of place. The kind of place where even tension was expected to behave. Maya washed her hands in the staff bathroom, drying them slowly, staring at her reflection for a second longer than usual. Then, she turned and walked toward the east wing. The door to Evelyn's sitting room was slightly open. Warm light spilled into the hallway. Soft, steady, nothing like the harsh glare of the kitchen or the cold gray outside. Maya paused just outside, not out of fear, out of instinct. Then she knocked once. Light but clear. Come in, Evelyn's voice called. Maya stepped inside. The room was quiet in a different way than the rest of the house. Less controlled, more lived in. Books stacked on the side table. A half-finished cup of tea. A blanket draped loosely over the arm of a chair like someone had actually used it instead of placing it there for appearance. And there she was. Evelyn Carter sat near the window, the coat still around her shoulders. Maya noticed it immediately. The same coat, folded differently now. Adjusted, but still there, still kept. Maya Williams, Evelyn said, her voice soft but certain, like she had already said the name several times before this moment. I nodded, once. Ma'am. Evelyn smiled faintly at that. You don't have to call me that. Maya didn't respond. She remained where she was, standing just inside the doorway, hands relaxed at her sides but not fully at ease. Evelyn noticed. Of course she did. Come sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Maya hesitated for half a second. Then she walked over and sat down, her back straight, her posture instinctively respectful but guarded. There was a pause, not awkward, just deliberate. Evelyn studied her quietly, taking in the details the way someone did when they weren't in a hurry to form conclusions. You're colder today, she said. Maya gave a small shrug. I'll manage. Evelyn's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't press it. Instead, she reached up and touched the edge of the coat wrapped around her. This was yours. It was just a coat. No, Evelyn said gently. It wasn't. That landed differently. Maya shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers tightening together for just a moment before relaxing again. You didn't have to do that, Evelyn continued. Most people wouldn't have. Maya looked down briefly, then back up. Most people didn't. Silence settled again. Outside, the wind moved faintly against the windows, a low reminder of what the world felt like beyond these walls. Evelyn leaned back slightly in her chair, her gaze never leaving Maya's face. Tell me something, she said. Why did you stop? Maya didn't answer right away, not because she didn't have an answer, because she didn't think it needed explaining. She looked like she needed help, she said finally. That's all? Maya met her eyes. Isn't that enough? Evelyn smiled then. Not wide, not dramatic, just something quiet and real. It should be, she said, but in my experience, it rarely is. Maya didn't argue with that, because she knew it was true. Evelyn reached for the small table beside her, picking up something Maya hadn't noticed before. A folded piece of paper. She held it for a moment, then set it down again without opening it. My son, she said slowly, doesn't understand that yet. Maya's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted just slightly. He understands what he's used to, she said. That's not the same thing. Evelyn nodded. No, she agreed. It isn't. Another pause. Then Evelyn leaned forward just a little, her voice lowering, more personal now. He thought you were taking something from me. Maya let out a quiet breath through her nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite frustration. Yeah, she said. I noticed. And you stayed anyway. Maya looked at her. You were still cold. The simplicity of it filled the room in a way that made everything else feel smaller. Evelyn sat back again, her fingers resting lightly on the coat. Kindness that costs you, she said softly, almost like she was reminding herself of something she had once known, is the rarest kind. Maya didn't respond, but she heard it, and somewhere, deep in a place she didn't let people see, it stayed. Evelyn studied her for another moment, then asked, What do you want, Maya? The question came out gently, but it carried weight. Maya blinked once, caught slightly off guard. What do you mean? From life, Evelyn said. From this. From anything. Maya leaned back slightly, her expression closing off just a fraction. I want to work, she said. I want to pay my bills. I want my mother to be okay. She paused. That's it. Evelyn watched her carefully. That's not everything. Maya's jaw tightened just slightly. It's enough. The words were firm, not defensive, just decided. Evelyn didn't push further. She nodded once, accepting the boundary for what it was. Then, after a moment, she said, I'd like you to stay. Maya frowned slightly. I already work here. Not like that, Evelyn said. I mean, with me, directly. The air shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. Maya straightened slightly. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because people like me don't get invited into spaces like this without a reason, Maya said. And I don't like reasons I can't see. Evelyn held her gaze. The reason is simple, she said. I trust you. Maya shook her head once. You don't know me. Evelyn's expression didn't change. I know enough. Silence stretched between them. Longer this time. Heavier. Maya stood up slowly. I should get back to work. Evelyn didn't stop her. But as Maya reached the door, she spoke again. Maya. Maya paused, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. You saw me, Evelyn said, when no one else did. A beat. That matters more than you think. Maya didn't turn around, but her grip on the door tightened just slightly. Then she stepped out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her, and as she walked away, the warmth of that room lingered just enough to make the cold outside feel sharper than before. By the time Maya stepped back into the main hallway, the house had returned to its usual rhythm, but something inside it had shifted in a way she couldn't ignore. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was the kind of shift you felt in how people looked at you half a second longer than before, a glance that lingered just enough to suggest something had changed. News traveled fast in places like this, not openly, not directly, but through tone, through posture, through the subtle ways people adjusted themselves around you. By the time Maya reached the service corridor, she already knew. They knew she had been called into Evelyn Carter's private sitting room. That alone was enough. She kept walking, her expression unchanged, her pace steady. She had learned long ago that the only way through spaces like this was to give people nothing they could use. Not fear, not pride, not even irritation, just distance. In the staff kitchen, two housemaids were speaking in low voices, their conversation cutting off the moment Maya stepped inside. One of them, A woman in her 40s named Denise offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're wanted upstairs now?" Denise asked casually. Maya reached for a glass, filling it with water before answering. "I spoke with Miss Carter." Denise nodded slowly, exchanging a quick glance with the other woman. "That's not something that happens often." Maya took a sip of water, unfazed. "I was in the area." The answer was simple. Too simple. Denise's lips pressed together slightly, like she wanted to say more but wasn't sure how far to push. "Just be careful," she said after a moment. Maya set the glass down. "About what?" Denise hesitated. Then, quietly, "People don't get pulled into that side of the house without it meaning something." Maya held her gaze for a second, long enough to acknowledge the warning, but not long enough to accept it. "It meant she needed help," Maya said. "That's all." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out, leaving the conversation unfinished. That was another thing she had learned. You didn't stand still long enough for other people's assumptions to settle on you. You kept moving. Always. But even as she continued through her tasks, something stayed with her. Evelyn's voice. "I trust you." It echoed in a way she didn't like, not because it wasn't genuine, but because it was. And genuine things had a way of complicating everything. Upstairs, Daniel Carter stood in his office, looking down at a file that he had already read twice. Maya Williams, age 28. No criminal record. Employment history consistent, if fragmented cleaning services, hospitality, temporary work. No financial irregularities. No outstanding debts beyond what would be expected. Nothing that stood out. That was the problem. She didn't fit. People who moved the way she had moved last night without hesitation, without calculation, usually had something behind it. A reason, a need, a strategy. But there was nothing in the report that explained it. And Daniel didn't like things he couldn't explain. He closed the file slowly, setting it on the desk. His reflection in the glass wall across from him looked exactly the way it always did. Composed, certain, untouched by doubt. But the feeling in his chest didn't match it. A knock at the door pulled him out of it. Yes. The door opened slightly. One of the senior staff stepping in. "Sir, Miss Williams has returned to her assigned duties." Daniel nodded once. "Good." The man hesitated. "Mrs. Carter has asked that she be reassigned." Daniel's expression didn't change. To what capacity? Direct support. There it was. Daniel exhaled slowly, turning slightly toward the window. He had expected this. That didn't mean he agreed with it. "Leave us," he said. The door closed quietly behind the man. Daniel stood there for a moment, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. Then he reached for his phone, dialing a number without hesitation. It rang once, twice. Then, "Mother, you've made a decision," Evelyn said, her voice calm, as if she had been expecting the call. Daniel didn't bother asking how she knew. "You're moving too quickly," he said. "Am I? You don't know her. I know enough." The same words she had used earlier. That unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "Trust isn't something you extend based on a single moment," he said. "No," Evelyn replied. "But sometimes a single moment reveals more truth than years of observation." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Or it hides it." A pause. Then softer. "You think I'm making a mistake. I think you're letting emotion override judgment." Another pause. Longer this time. "And I think," Evelyn said carefully, "that you've spent so long expecting the worst in people that you no longer recognize the best when you see it." The words landed harder than he expected. Daniel didn't respond immediately, because part of him, just a small part, recognized the truth in them, and he didn't like it. "She doesn't belong in your personal space," he said finally. "That's not her decision." "No," Evelyn agreed. "It's mine." Silence. Clean. Final. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "If this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that." "No," she said. "But I can choose who I trust." Another pause. Then quietly, "Can you?" The question hung there, unanswered. Daniel ended the call without another word. Downstairs, Maya continued working, unaware of the conversation happening above her. but not unaware of the shift it would bring. She felt it in the way the house moved around her now. Subtle, controlled, but different. And when the house manager approached her less than an hour later, his posture formal, his tone carefully neutral, she already knew. "Miss Williams," he said, "you've been reassigned." Maya straightened slightly. To where? Mrs. Carter's direct staff. There it was. The thing she had tried to avoid. The thing she had seen coming the moment Evelyn said, "I trust you." Maya held his gaze for a second, then nodded once. Understood. No hesitation. No protest. Just acceptance. But as she turned to follow him, something inside her tightened. Not fear. Not excitement. Something more complicated than either. Because she knew this wasn't just a change in duties. It was a step across a line she had spent her entire life learning not to cross. And once you crossed it, there was no going back to where you had been before. The first day in Evelyn Carter's wing did not begin with instructions. It began with silence. Not the controlled silence of the rest of the house, where everything was designed to feel effortless, but a quieter, older kind, one that belonged to time, to memory, to things that had settled and chosen not to be moved. Maya noticed it the moment she stepped through the threshold. The air felt different, less curated, more human. Evelyn was already awake, seated by the window with a book resting open in her lap, though she wasn't reading it. She looked up as Maya entered, her expression calm, almost expectant. "You came," she said. Maya nodded once. "I work here." Evelyn smiled faintly at that, closing the book and setting it aside. That's one way to look at it. Maya didn't respond. She stood just inside the room, waiting, not unsure, just unwilling to assume anything about what this new role meant. Evelyn watched her for a moment, then gestured toward the small table near the window. "Sit." Maya hesitated, then stepped forward and sat down, her posture straight, her hands resting lightly on her knees. Still guarded, still measured. "Do you know what most people do when they're brought into this room?" Evelyn asked. Maya shook her head. "They try to impress me," Evelyn said. "They talk too much. They move too fast. They show me who they think I want to see." A small pause. "You don't do that." Maya met her gaze. "I don't know what you want to see." Exactly. That seemed to please Evelyn more than anything else had so far. A tray sat on the side table, tea, toast, fruit arranged with quiet precision. Maya noticed it immediately, then looked back at Evelyn. "You haven't eaten." Evelyn followed her gaze, then smiled slightly. "I was waiting. For me? For someone who would notice." That landed in a way Maya didn't expect. Not as pressure, not as praise, just acknowledgement. Maya stood without another word, moving toward the tray. Her movements were simple, efficient, familiar. She poured the tea, adjusted the plate, placed everything within easy reach. Not performative, not careful in the way people were when they wanted approval. Just right. Evelyn watched her closely. Not the actions themselves, but the intention behind them. "You've done this before," she said. Maya shook her head slightly. "Not like this." "No," Evelyn agreed. "Not like this." A quiet settled between them again. Maya stepped back once everything was arranged, returning to her seat without being asked. Evelyn picked up the cup, taking a small sip. "Tell me about your mother," she said. Maya's expression shifted, just slightly. Not closed, but more protected. "She lives in Detroit," she said. "Health's not great. I send money when I can." "And when you can't?" Maya looked down for a brief moment, then back up. "I figure it out." Evelyn nodded slowly, absorbing that. "You carry a lot." Maya didn't answer, because there was nothing to add to that. Evelyn set the cup down, her fingers resting lightly against the porcelain. "Do you know what my son sees when he looks at you?" she asked. Maya's gaze didn't waver. "Someone who doesn't belong here." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "That's part of it." A pause. "He also sees something he can't control." That was different. Maya didn't respond right away. "And that bothers him," Evelyn added. Maya let out a quiet breath. "That's not my problem." Evelyn smiled faintly. "No," she said. "But it will become one if you stay. The honesty in that wasn't threatening. It was grounding. Maya nodded once, accepting it for what it was. Then I'll deal with it. Evelyn leaned back slightly in her chair, studying her again. You don't scare easily. Maya shook her head. I learned early that being scared doesn't change anything. That answer stayed in the room a little longer than the others had. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the glass, a reminder of the world beyond these walls. Inside, something steadier was taking shape. Later that morning, Maya moved through the rest of Evelyn's space, learning it without being taught. She noticed what was used and what wasn't. Which drawers opened often, which books were worn at the edges, which objects had been moved recently, and which had been left untouched for years. It wasn't something she thought about. It was something she felt. By midday, she had already adjusted small things, nothing obvious, nothing that would draw attention, just enough to make the space function more naturally. When Evelyn noticed, she didn't say anything at first. She simply observed. Then, as Maya adjusted the position of a chair near the window, subtle, almost unnoticeable, Evelyn spoke. You pay attention. Maya glanced at her briefly. I listen more than I talk. Evelyn nodded. That's rare. Another pause. Then, quieter. It's also dangerous. Maya didn't ask why. She didn't need to, because she understood. People who listened heard things others missed, and people didn't always like being seen that clearly. In the early afternoon, Daniel appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He simply stood there, his presence filling the space in a way that shifted everything without a word. Maya felt it immediately. She didn't turn right away. She finished what she was doing, folding a blanket neatly over the arm of a chair, then straightened and faced him. Evelyn looked between them, her expression unreadable but aware. You've settled in, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. I'm working, Maya replied. Same tone, same calm. Daniel's eyes moved through the room, taking in the small changes, the adjustments, the subtle shifts that made everything feel different, more lived in, more real, he noticed. Of course he did. You're making decisions, he said. Maya didn't flinch. I'm doing the job. A beat. Then, if you want everything put back the way it was, I can do that. The offer wasn't defensive. It was direct, practical. Daniel held her gaze for a moment longer, then shook his head once. No. The word came out quieter than expected. Evelyn watched that exchange with quiet interest. She sees what needs to be done, she said, before anyone asks. Daniel didn't respond immediately, because that was exactly what unsettled him. Finally, he spoke. Just make sure you don't overstep. Maya nodded once. I won't. Another pause. Then Daniel turned to leave, but not before his eyes flicked back to her one last time. Something unreadable still sitting just beneath the surface. When he was gone, the room settled again, but not completely. Something lingered, something that hadn't been there before. Evelyn looked at Maya, her expression softer now, but with a quiet certainty behind it. He doesn't know what to do with you, she said. Maya let out a small breath, almost a smile. That makes two of us. And for the first time, since she had stepped into this house, something close to warmth, not the kind that came from coats or rooms or controlled temperatures, but something quieter, something earned began to take shape in a place she hadn't expected to find it. By the second day, the house no longer watched Maya Williams the same way. It watched her more carefully, not openly, not in ways that could be called out, but in the pauses, conversations that stopped when she entered a room, eyes that lingered a fraction too long before looking away, movements that adjusted around her presence as if trying to understand where she now belonged, because she no longer fit into any clear place. Not just staff, not quite, something else. And that made people uneasy. Maya felt it immediately, the same way she had felt everything else since stepping into Evelyn Carter's wing. She didn't react. She didn't slow down. She simply moved through it. The same steady rhythm, the same quiet control. But inside, she was measuring, not people, patterns. That morning, it started small. A A misplaced file in Evelyn's study. Nothing important at first glance, just a financial summary left slightly out of alignment with the rest. Maya noticed because it didn't match the order she had already memorized. She didn't touch it, just noted it. Later, in the kitchen, a conversation cut off too quickly when she walked in. Two members of the administrative staff, one of them from the corporate office, exchanged a glance that lingered just long enough to mean something. "You're adjusting well," one of them said casually. Too casually. Maya nodded once. "I do my job." "That's one way to put it," the woman replied, her smile polite but tight. Maya didn't stay. She didn't give the moment time to become something else, but she carried it with her. Back upstairs, Evelyn was resting. The book from the day before now open again. Though her eyes were closed, Maya moved quietly through the room, adjusting small things, making sure everything was within reach. As she passed the desk, her eyes flicked once, just once, toward the papers stacked neatly at the corner. Something was off. Not the content, the placement. One sheet slightly out of alignment, its edge not matching the clean lines of the others. She stopped. Not fully. Just enough. Then she moved on. Because instinct told her something important. When things are wrong on purpose, touching them too soon makes you part of the mistake. Evelyn's voice broke the silence. "You see it too." Maya turned. Evelyn's eyes were open now, watching her. Not surprised. Not concerned. Just aware. Maya held her gaze for a second. "Something's been moved," she said. "Yes. Was it supposed to be?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's what we're going to find out." That changed the air in the room. Not dramatically, but enough. Maya stepped closer to the desk now. Slower this time. Her movements deliberate. She didn't reach for the papers immediately. She studied them first. The angles, the spacing, the small inconsistencies that most people wouldn't notice because they weren't trained to look that closely. "It wasn't random," she said. Evelyn watched her. "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." Maya picked up the single sheet carefully, scanning it quickly. Financial entries. Clean. Too clean. Numbers that lined up perfectly, but something about them felt rehearsed. "These don't belong here," Maya said. "They belong somewhere else in the report." Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something in her posture sharpened. "Show me." Maya laid the sheet down, pointing to a sequence of figures. "This section is duplicated," she said, "but adjusted just enough that it looks new." A pause. "If you're not looking for it, you won't catch it." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she followed the numbers. Then she sat back. "And if someone wanted to move money without it being obvious?" Maya didn't hesitate. "That's how they do it." Silence filled the room. Heavy now. Deliberate. Outside, a car passed in the distance. The sound faint, but grounding. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap, her gaze drifting briefly toward the window before returning to Maya. "You weren't trained for this," she said. Maya shook her head. "No." "Then how do you see it?" Maya's expression didn't change. "Because I've seen what happens when numbers don't match real life." The answer was simple, but it carried weight. Evelyn understood that immediately. She nodded once, slowly. "My son trusts these reports," she said. Maya looked at her. "Then someone's counting on that." Another silence. This one different. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Downstairs, footsteps echoed faintly through the hallway. The house continuing its rhythm, unaware of the shift happening above it. Evelyn reached for the edge of Maya's old coat, still draped over the chair beside her, her fingers resting there for a moment as if grounding herself. "You don't belong here," she said quietly. Maya didn't react. "I know." Evelyn's eyes lifted to meet hers. "That may be the only reason you can see what others can't." That landed deeper than anything else had so far. Because it wasn't praise. It was responsibility. Maya glanced back at the desk, at the paper, at the small detail that didn't fit, and now meant something much larger than it had a few minutes ago. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She studied Maya for a long moment, as if weighing not just the question but the person asking it. Then she said, "For now?" A pause. Nothing. Maya frowned slightly. Nothing? Not yet, Evelyn said. Because the moment we move too soon, whoever did this will know we're watching. The logic was clear. Clean. Dangerous. Maya nodded once. So we wait. Evelyn's expression softened just slightly. We pay attention. Maya turned back toward the desk, her gaze sharper now, more focused. The house had changed again, not in how it looked, in what it held beneath the surface. And as she stepped away from the papers, returning them exactly as she had found them, she understood something she hadn't expected when she walked into this place. The cold outside had been honest. This quiet, controlled world of polished floors and perfect systems, this was where things hid. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she had seen something she couldn't unsee. Daniel Carter noticed the change before anyone said a word. It wasn't in the reports. Not yet. It wasn't in the numbers, or the schedules, or the polished routines that kept everything running exactly the way it should. It was in the air. Subtle. Controlled. But different. The kind of shift that only showed up when something beneath the surface had started to move. He stood in his office, reviewing a set of quarterly projections, but his attention wasn't on the figures. It kept drifting back to the hallway, to the way conversations had gone quiet when Maya Williams passed, to the way his mother had looked at him the night before, not with disagreement, but with certainty. That unsettled him more than anything else. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in." His chief financial officer, Richard Hale, stepped inside, closing the door behind him with quiet precision. Late 50s, impeccable posture. The kind of man who had built his career on being invisible in all the ways that mattered and indispensable in all the ways that counted. "You wanted to review the Carter Holdings report," Richard said, placing a folder on the desk. Daniel nodded once, gesturing for him to continue. Richard moved forward, opening the file, his tone smooth, practiced. "Everything is aligned with our projections. Revenue streams are stable, expenditures within expected margins. No irregularities." Daniel listened, or at least, he appeared to. His gaze dropped briefly to the pages, scanning the numbers with the kind of speed that came from years of experience. Everything looked exactly the way it should. Clean, balanced, controlled, perfect, too perfect. The thought surfaced uninvited. Daniel closed the file slowly. "Walk me through this section again," he said, tapping lightly on one part of the report. Richard didn't hesitate. "That's the real estate reallocation," he explained. "We shifted some assets to maintain liquidity in the Midwest portfolio." His explanation was precise, confident, unshaken. Daniel watched him carefully. Not the words, the delivery. There was no crack, no hesitation, no sign of uncertainty. And yet something didn't sit right. Not enough to call it out, but enough to stay. "And these numbers?" Daniel asked, pointing again. "Duplicated entries," Richard said smoothly. "Adjusted to reflect projected gains." The same words Maya had used, different tone, different intention. Daniel's fingers stilled against the paper for just a fraction of a second. Then he leaned back in his chair, his expression giving nothing away. "Understood," he said. Richard closed the folder. "Is there anything else?" Daniel shook his head once. "No." Richard gave a slight nod and turned to leave. But as his hand reached the door, Daniel spoke again. "Richard." He paused. "Yes? Who else has access to these reports before they reach me?" A small question, simple on the surface. Richard didn't turn fully around. "Only senior financial staff," he said. "Standard protocol." "Of course." "A beat." Then Daniel added, "Tighten it." Richard's posture shifted just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice. But Daniel did. "Is there a concern?" he asked. Daniel held his gaze for a moment. Then, calmly, "No. Just caution." Richard nodded once. "Understood." Then he left, the door closing softly behind him. Daniel remained still for a long moment, staring at the file in front of him. The room felt quieter now. He reached for the page again, flipping back to the section Maya had unknowingly pointed toward through his mother. The numbers stared back at him perfectly aligned, flawlessly presented. And yet, Now that he had seen it, he couldn't unsee it. The duplication, the adjustment, the slight shift that made it look legitimate. He exhaled slowly, setting the file down. This wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something. And something was more dangerous than nothing. Upstairs, Maya stood by the window in Evelyn's sitting room. Her arms crossed lightly as she looked out over the snow-covered grounds. She wasn't thinking about the view. She was replaying the numbers, the patterns, the way they had been moved just enough to disappear into everything else. She had seen things like that before. Not in places like this, but in smaller ways. Bills that didn't match, accounts that came up short, systems that worked until they didn't. Behind her, Evelyn watched quietly. "You're still thinking about it," she said. Maya didn't turn. "Yeah. Good." Maya glanced over her shoulder. "Good?" Evelyn nodded. "It means you're paying attention." Maya turned fully now, her expression steady, but more focused than before. "If those numbers are wrong," she said, "it's not a mistake." "No," Evelyn agreed. "It isn't." A pause. Then Maya added, "And whoever did it knows what they're doing." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in recognition. "Yes." Silence settled between them again, heavier this time, more intentional. "He won't see it right away," Maya said. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "My son?" Maya nodded. "He trusts the system," she said. "People like him. They don't expect it to be broken from the inside." Evelyn studied her for a moment. Then, softly, "And you do?" Maya held her gaze. "I expect everything to break eventually." The honesty of it sat in the room like something solid. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't need to, because she understood exactly where that came from. Downstairs, Daniel picked up his phone again. This time, he didn't call anyone from his company. He called someone else. "I need an independent review," he said the moment the line connected. Quiet. No paper trail. A pause. Then, "Yes." Immediately, he ended the call, setting the phone down with more force than necessary. For the first time since the night on the church steps, something else had entered his world. Not confusion, not curiosity, suspicion, real suspicion. And it wasn't directed outward. It was turning inward. Back upstairs, Maya moved away from the window, her gaze returning briefly to the desk where the paper still sat exactly where she had left it, untouched, unchanged, waiting. "If they're doing this," she said slowly, "it's not the first time." Evelyn followed her gaze. "No," she said, "it isn't." Another pause. Then, quieter. "And it won't be the last, if we don't stop it." Maya nodded once. Not dramatic, not reactive, just certain. Because now she understood something clearly. The coat had been the beginning, a moment, a choice, something simple. But this was different. This was something hidden, something intentional, something that could hurt people who would never even know where it came from. And once she saw that she couldn't walk away from it, not anymore. The first accusation came quietly, almost politely, the kind that tried to pass as procedure instead of what it really was. Maya was in the lower storage room, checking inventory against the weekly supply list, when the house manager appeared in the doorway with two members of the administrative staff standing just behind him. Their posture was formal, too formal for something routine. Maya looked up, already knowing something had shifted again. "Miss Williams," the house manager said, his tone measured, careful. "We need you to come with us." Maya straightened slowly, setting the clipboard down. "For what?" A brief hesitation. "Not long, but long enough. There's been an issue," he said. That was all. No detail, no explanation. Just enough to signal that this wasn't optional. Maya wiped her hands on the side of her uniform, then nodded once. "All right." They didn't walk beside her. They walked slightly behind. Not aggressively, not openly suspicious, but positioned in a way that made the message clear. She was no longer just staff moving through routine. She was being escorted. The room they led her to was small, functional, used for internal meetings. Daniel was already there. So was Richard Hale. The CFO stood near the window, hands loosely clasped, his expression neutral in a way that felt practiced. Daniel stood by the table, his posture still, controlled, his gaze fixed on Maya as she entered. Maya stopped just inside the doorway. She didn't ask permission to step further. She didn't fill the silence. She waited. Daniel spoke first. "A watch is missing," he said. Straight to it. No preamble. Maya didn't react immediately. "And?" she asked. Richard stepped forward slightly, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "It was last seen in my office this morning," he said. "And according to the access log." A small pause, just enough to draw attention to what came next. "You were the only one who entered that space afterward." There it was. Clean. Simple. Framed. Maya let the words settle, not because she needed time to think, because she understood exactly what this was. "You think I took it?" she said. Daniel didn't answer right away. That hesitation, small but present, didn't go unnoticed. "We're asking you to explain," he said finally. Maya's eyes moved from him to Richard, then back again. "There's nothing to explain," she said. "I didn't take anything." Richard's expression didn't change. "Of course," he said, "and we want to believe that. But given the circumstances," he let the sentence trail off, unfinished but complete in implication. Maya's jaw tightened slightly. "Then, check," she said. "Search whatever you need to search." Daniel studied her. Again, that same thing, no panic, no defensiveness, no attempt to redirect. Just direct, unfiltered certainty. "We will," he said. The room went still as one of the staff members stepped forward. Not aggressive, not invasive, but thorough. They checked her bag first, then her pockets, then the small locker assigned to her in the staff area. Nothing. The absence of evidence didn't clear the air. It made it heavier, because now the accusation had to go somewhere else. Richard stepped back slightly, folding his hands again. "It may have been misplaced," he said, but the way he said it didn't sound like belief. It sounded like strategy. Maya looked at him, her gaze sharper now. "Or moved," she said. Richard met her eyes, unshaken. "That's another possibility." Daniel's attention shifted between them, something tightening beneath the surface. He didn't like this. Not because of the missing watch, because of the way the room felt. Controlled, directed, like a situation that had already been decided before it began. "When did you enter the office?" he asked Maya. "Mid-morning," she replied. "To clean." "Alone?" "Yes." "How long were you there?" 10 minutes. "Did you open the desk?" Maya didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was cleaning it." The answer was simple, obvious, and yet, in this room, it didn't land that way. Daniel exhaled slowly, his fingers pressing lightly against the edge of the table. "This isn't about blame," he said. "It's about clarity." Maya held his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "It's about trust." The words landed harder than anything else that had been said so far. Richard shifted slightly, just enough to register discomfort. "We're trying to resolve this quickly," he said. "Then resolve it," Maya replied. "Because I didn't take anything." Silence. Heavy. Deliberate. Then, without warning, the door opened. Evelyn Carter stepped inside. No announcement. No hesitation. Just presence. The room changed instantly. Not in volume. In gravity. Daniel straightened. "Mother, what's happening?" Evelyn asked, her voice calm but carrying something beneath it that didn't need to be raised to be felt. Daniel glanced at Richard briefly, then back at her. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said. Evelyn's eyes moved to Maya, taking in her posture, her stillness, the way she stood without shrinking or pushing back. "Explain it to me," Evelyn said. Richard stepped forward slightly. "A watch is missing," he said. "And Miss Williams was the only person with access to the area where it was last seen." Evelyn listened. Then she asked one question. "And you searched her?" "Yes." "And nothing was found." A pause. Then Evelyn looked at Daniel. Not at Richard. Not at the staff. At her son. "Then why is she still standing here like this?" The question wasn't loud, but it cut clean. Daniel didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a clean answer, not one that didn't expose something he wasn't ready to name yet. Maya broke the silence. "It's fine," she said. "This is how it goes." Evelyn turned back to her. "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." Another silence. This one sharper, more defined. Then, slowly, Evelyn stepped further into the room, her presence shifting the balance completely. "You don't accuse someone based on proximity," she said. "You prove it." Richard's expression tightened just slightly. "We're following procedure," he said. Evelyn's eyes didn't leave his face. "Then your procedure is flawed." The room held that. No one moved, no one spoke. And for the first time since Maya had stepped into this house, the tension was no longer directed at her. It had turned, and everyone in the room felt it. The room didn't settle after Evelyn spoke. It tightened. Not visibly, no one raised their voice, no one moved out of place, but the balance had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. Maya felt it immediately. The weight was no longer pressing down on her. It had lifted, just enough to expose what had been beneath it all along. Daniel's gaze moved slowly from his mother to Richard, then back to Maya. Something in his expression had changed, not fully. Not yet, but the certainty that had been there before was no longer clean. It was fractured. "We're not done here," he said finally, his voice quieter, more controlled than before. It wasn't directed at Maya. Not entirely. Richard stepped in smoothly, reclaiming ground that had slipped away from him. "Of course not," he said. "We still need to account for the missing item." Evelyn didn't look at him this time. Her attention stayed on her son. "Then account for it properly," she said. Not conveniently. That word landed harder than the accusation itself. Convenient, because that's exactly what it had been. Maya said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth had already begun to shift in the room. Daniel exhaled slowly, then reached for the file on the table. Not the watch report, but the financial documents he had been reviewing earlier. He opened it, flipping directly to the section that had been bothering him since the morning. "Walk me through this again," he said, his tone flat. Richard didn't hesitate. "We've already. Walk me through it again." This time, there was no room for deflection. A small pause. Then Richard stepped closer, his posture still composed, but the ease from earlier had tightened. "These are standard adjustments," he said, pointing to the numbers. "Projected reallocations to maintain liquidity." Daniel's eyes didn't leave the page. "And the duplication?" "A beat. Accounting necessity," Richard replied smoothly. "It ensures continuity across reporting periods." Maya felt it, before she understood it. Not the words, the rhythm. It was the same tone he had used earlier. The same controlled explanation. The same structure designed to sound complete without actually answering anything. She stepped forward, just slightly. Not enough to interrupt, just enough to be seen. "It's not continuity," she said. The room stilled. Daniel looked up. Richard didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression remained calm, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Excuse me?" Maya didn't flinch. "It's duplication with adjustment," she said. The same entry moved just enough to look new. Silence. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was precise. Daniel's attention snapped fully to her now. "You're certain?" Maya nodded once. "Yes." Richard let out a quiet breath, almost amused. "With all due respect," he said, "this is a complex financial structure. It's something I've seen before." Maya cut in. Not louder, not aggressive, but firm enough to break through the tone he was trying to maintain. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes this time. "In what context?" Maya held his gaze. "In places where numbers are used to hide what's really happening." That landed, not as proof, but as disruption. Daniel closed the file slowly, his fingers pressing against the edge of the paper. "Run it again," he said. Richard blinked once. "I just did." "No," Daniel replied, his voice quieter now but heavier. "Run it again, without assumptions." A pause. Then, "And without you." That was the first real break. Subtle, but undeniable. Richard's posture stiffened just slightly. If you're questioning I'm verifying my system, Daniel said. That's my job. Silence stretched between them, long enough for everyone in the room to feel exactly what had just shifted. Richard nodded once. Slowly. Of course. But the word didn't sound the same anymore. It sounded like something being contained. He stepped back, giving space but not yielding ground. Not yet. Daniel turned to Maya again. How long have you been seeing this? Maya shook her head. Since yesterday. And you didn't say anything? I did, she said, glancing briefly at Evelyn. Just not to you. That was fair. Uncomfortable, but fair. Daniel absorbed that, his jaw tightening slightly. Then he nodded once. You should have come to me. Maya didn't argue. You wouldn't have listened. Another silence. This one different, because no one in the room could say she was wrong. Evelyn watched it all unfold without interruption, her hands resting lightly in her lap, her presence steady, anchoring the space in a way that no one else could. Finally, she spoke. The watch, she said. All eyes turned back to her. We're still missing it. Daniel nodded once. Yes. Evelyn's gaze moved slowly across the room, settling briefly on Richard before returning to her son. Then, perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Daniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? Instead of asking who took it, she said, ask why it disappeared now. That reframed everything. Not the accusation, the timing. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind already moving ahead, connecting threads that hadn't been connected before. The financial discrepancies, the sudden accusation, the attempt to isolate Maya. It wasn't random. It was alignment. Maya saw it in his expression before he said a word. You think this is connected, he said. She nodded. I think someone needed a distraction. The room went still again, but this time, the stillness wasn't confusion. It was clarity beginning to form. Richard let out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. That's a serious claim, he said. It is, Maya replied, which is why you should check everything. Daniel didn't take his eyes off her. We will. A pause. Then, turning to the staff. Clear this room. No hesitation. No delay. The staff moved immediately, filing out in silence until only the four of them remained. Daniel looked at Richard. Leave the files. It wasn't a request. Richard hesitated for the briefest moment. Then he set the folder down on the table and stepped back. Of course. But as he turned to leave, his eyes flicked once quick, controlled toward Maya. And in that split second, something slipped. Not enough for anyone else to catch. But Maya saw it, and that was enough. When the door closed behind him, the room felt different again. Quieter, but sharper. Daniel looked at Maya. If you're right, he said, this doesn't stop at a watch. Maya met his gaze. No, she said. It doesn't. And for the first time since she had stepped into this house, the line between her world and his had disappeared completely because whatever was happening now, they were both standing in the same place, looking at the same truth, and neither of them could walk away from it anymore. After Richard Hale left the room, the silence that followed was not empty. It was charged, deliberate, and dangerous in a way none of them could ignore anymore. Daniel stood still for a moment, his eyes on the closed door, as if measuring something that had just shifted beyond his control. Then he turned back to the table, to the files, to the numbers that had looked perfect just hours ago and now felt constructed, not wrong, not obviously, but intentionally arranged to avoid being questioned. That was worse. Lock everything down, he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Maya didn't need clarification. She already understood what he meant. But Evelyn spoke first. Quietly, she added. Daniel nodded once. Quietly. He reached for his phone again, dialing a number without hesitation. I want a full internal audit, he said the moment the call connected. Independent team. No prior notice. No internal oversight. A pause. Then, more sharply. And, I want access logs pulled from every financial system for the last 6 months. Another pause. No exceptions. He ended the call without waiting for a response. placing the phone down on the table with controlled precision. When he looked up again, his focus had sharpened completely. This was his world now. Not uncertainty, not assumption, investigation. "If someone is doing this," he said, more to himself than to either of them, "they've been doing it for a while." Maya leaned slightly against the edge of the desk, her arms folded loosely, her posture relaxed but her attention fully engaged. "Long enough to get comfortable," she said. Daniel glanced at her. "Comfortable people make mistakes." Maya shook her head slightly. "Careful people don't." That stopped him, not because it contradicted him, but because it refined what he was thinking into something more precise. Evelyn watched the exchange quietly, her eyes moving between them, seeing not just what was being said, but what was forming beneath it. Then, "We're not looking for someone careless," she said. "We're looking for someone patient." Daniel nodded slowly, and close. That word settled into the room like something solid. Close meant access. Close meant trust. Close meant someone inside. Maya's gaze flicked briefly toward the door Richard had exited through. Just for a second. Then back again. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Daniel saw it anyway. "You think it's him?" he said. Maya didn't answer directly. "I think he wasn't surprised," she said. "Not when the watch came up. Not when the numbers were questioned." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "That's not proof." "No," Maya agreed. "But it's not nothing either." Another silence. This one sharper, more focused. Daniel turned back to the table, flipping through the file again. Slower this time, more deliberate. He wasn't reading anymore. He was studying. Patterns. Repetition. Small inconsistencies that would have slipped past him before because he hadn't been looking for them. Now he was. And once you started looking, you couldn't stop. "If he's involved," Daniel said, "he won't act alone." Maya nodded. "People like that don't." Evelyn leaned back slightly, her fingers resting lightly against the arm of her chair. "Then the question isn't just who," she said. "It's how many." That made the room feel smaller, because it meant this wasn't a single breach. It was a system, and systems didn't collapse cleanly. They fractured. Daniel closed the file again, more decisively this time. "We need to control what they know," he said. "If they realize we're onto them, they'll move faster," Maya finished. "Or disappear." He nodded once. "Exactly." Another pause. Then he looked at her again, more directly this time. "From now on, you don't move alone in this house." Maya frowned slightly. "I'm not the one doing anything wrong." "That doesn't matter," Daniel said. "If they think you've seen something, I have seen something, then you're a liability to them." The word hung there, not as an insult, as a fact. Maya held his gaze, unflinching. "I've been a liability before," she said. "I know how to handle it." Daniel didn't look convinced. "This is different. It's always different," Maya replied quietly. "That doesn't change what it is." The honesty in that wasn't defiant. It was grounded, lived. Evelyn watched them both, her expression thoughtful. "She's right," she said. "Danger doesn't change its nature just because the surroundings are more expensive." Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand over his jaw. He didn't like this. Not the situation. Not the risk. Not the fact that the one person who had seen the problem first was also the least protected in his world. "Fine," he said finally. "But you stay close to this wing. No unnecessary movement." Maya nodded once. "Understood." Another pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, Daniel added, "And if anything feels off, you tell me immediately." Maya met his eyes. "I already tried that once." The words weren't sharp, but they carried weight. Daniel didn't respond right away, because again, she wasn't wrong. "Then tell me again," he said quietly. That was different. Not authority, not control. Something closer to acknowledgement. Maya held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "All right." Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the windows in a low, steady rhythm. Inside, the air had changed completely. What had started as a simple misunderstanding, a missing watch, a misplaced accusation had unfolded into something far more dangerous. something deliberate, something hidden. And now, for the first time, all three of them were looking at it the same way, not as an isolated incident, but as a system that had been operating quietly, waiting for the moment it would be noticed. And now that it had been there, was no going back to not seeing it. Daniel picked up the file one last time, his grip tightening slightly. "We move carefully," he said. Maya nodded. Evelyn said nothing, but the way she looked at both of them made one thing clear. Whatever came next, this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, and truth, once uncovered, had a way of demanding more than anyone was prepared to give. The house changed again that night, though no one announced it, and nothing on the surface looked different. The lights still came on at the same hour. Dinner was served at the same table with the same precision. Staff moved through the halls with the same quiet efficiency. But underneath it all, something had tightened. A thread pulled just enough that everything else had to adjust around it. Maya felt it the moment she stepped out of Evelyn's wing to return to the staff corridor. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't even a movement. It was the absence of something normal: rhythm, natural flow, the unspoken ease that had been there before. Now it felt watched, calculated, measured. She didn't change her pace. She didn't look around, but her awareness sharpened. Every reflection in the glass, every shadow at the edge of a hallway, every door that seemed just slightly more closed than it had been earlier. She had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself. It revealed itself in the way things stopped making sense. Downstairs, the kitchen was quieter than usual for that time of evening. Fewer voices, shorter conversations. Denise glanced up when Maya entered, her expression unreadable. "Long day," she said, not really asking. Maya nodded once, reaching for a glass of water. "Getting longer." Denise hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You need to be careful." Maya didn't react immediately. "You said that before." "I mean it now," Denise said. There was something different in her tone this time. Less warning, more urgency. Maya looked at her. "What changed?" Denise glanced toward the doorway, then back. "People are asking questions," she said. "Not about the watch." A pause. "About you." That landed. Not as fear, as confirmation. Maya took a slow sip of water, her mind already moving ahead. "Let them ask," she said. Denise shook her head slightly. "You don't understand." Maya set the glass down, meeting her eyes. "Then explain it." Another hesitation. Then, quietly, "People who don't belong here. They don't get questioned." Denise's voice dropped further. "They get removed." The word hung there. Simple. Final. Maya held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once. "I've been removed before." Denise's expression tightened. "Not like this." Maya didn't respond, because part of her knew Denise was right. This wasn't a job she could lose and replace in a week. This wasn't a situation she could walk away from without consequences following her. This was something larger, more controlled, more dangerous, and now she was inside it. Upstairs, Daniel stood in the security room, watching the playback from earlier that morning. The footage ran in clean, silent loops across multiple screens, hallways, offices, entry points, angles designed to leave as little unseen as possible. He had already reviewed it twice. Now he was watching it again. Slower, frame by frame. "Pause it," he said. The technician froze the screen. Maya appeared in the frame entering Richard's office, moving with the same steady, unhurried pace she carried everywhere. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Run it." The footage continued. Maya moved through the room, cleaning, adjusting small things. At one point, she opened the desk drawer. The moment Richard had focused on, the moment that had become the accusation. "Stop." The frame froze again. Daniel leaned in slightly, studying it. The angle wasn't perfect. It didn't show inside the drawer. Just her hand, the motion, the timing. "Zoom in." The technician adjusted the image. Grainier now, less clear, but enough. Daniel watched closely as the footage resumed. Maya's hand moved, then paused, then shifted something inside the drawer. Not taking, not removing, adjusting, securing. Exactly what she had said. Daniel exhaled slowly. Run the rest. The footage continued until she left the room. No hesitation. No concealment. No behavior that matched what had been implied. He stepped back. The conclusion was no longer a question. It was fact. Pull every access point to that office for the last 12 hours, he said. The technician nodded, already moving, and cross-reference it with employee movement logs. Yes, sir. Daniel turned away from the screens, his jaw tightening slightly. The system hadn't just failed. It had been used, deliberately, and someone inside it had counted on him not looking closely enough to see it. Upstairs, Maya moved back toward Evelyn's wing, her steps quiet, but her thoughts, anything but. Denise's words stayed with her. They get removed. She had lived enough life to know that didn't always mean fired. Sometimes it meant erased in ways that didn't leave a trace. She reached the door to Evelyn's sitting room and paused for a brief moment before entering. Evelyn looked up immediately. Something's changed, she said. Not a question. Maya closed the door behind her. Yeah. Evelyn set her book aside. Tell me. Maya stepped further into the room, her posture steady but her eyes sharper now. They're asking about me, she said. Not the watch. Evelyn's expression didn't shift, but her attention deepened. That was fast. Too fast, Maya replied. A pause. Then, and too quiet. Evelyn nodded slowly, which means they're adjusting. Maya crossed her arms lightly, her gaze moving briefly toward the window before returning. They know something's off, she said. They don't know what we know, but they know something changed. Another silence. This one, heavier, more dangerous. And people like that don't wait, Maya added. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her fingers resting against the arm of her chair. No, she said. They don't. The room settled into that understanding. Then Evelyn asked, What do you think they'll do? Maya didn't answer immediately. She thought about it. Not emotionally, logically, the way she had learned to survive situations where the outcome depended on seeing one step further than everyone else. They'll try to control the narrative, she said finally. Make it look like nothing's wrong. A pause. Or make it look like I'm the problem. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. You already were. Not enough, Maya said. That didn't stick. The implication was clear. If the first attempt failed, there would be another. Stronger, cleaner, harder to undo. Evelyn sat with that for a moment, then nodded. Then, we move first. Maya looked at her. How? Evelyn's expression didn't change, but there was something firmer in it now, something that hadn't been there before. We stop reacting, she said, and we start choosing. That shifted something, not just in the situation, in Maya, because for the first time since this began, the path forward didn't feel like something happening to her. It felt like something she could step into, not safely, not easily, but deliberately. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing against the windows in long, steady strokes. Inside, the house remained quiet, controlled, unchanged. But beneath that surface, everything was moving. And this time, Maya wasn't just watching it happen. She was part of it. The move came just before midnight, when the house was at its quietest and the illusion of safety was at its strongest. Maya felt it before she understood it. Not a sound, not a signal, just the same absence she had noticed earlier, something in the rhythm of the house dropping out of place. She was in the small sitting room adjacent to Evelyn's bedroom, reviewing the day in her mind the way she always did when something didn't sit right. Patterns, gaps, the way conversations had shortened, the way eyes had shifted, the way Denise's voice had lowered when she said the word removed, and then footsteps, not rushed, not heavy, but wrong, too controlled for that hour, too deliberate to belong to routine. Maya stood slowly, her body already adjusting before her mind finished the thought. She moved toward the door, opening it just enough to look into the hallway. Two men, not staff, not anyone she had seen working in the house. Dark jackets, quiet movements, one of them speaking softly into a phone, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, now. That was enough. Maya stepped back immediately, closing the door without sound. Evelyn, she said. her voice low but firm. The older woman looked up, instantly alert, not confused, not slow. "What is it?" "We're not alone," Maya said. No hesitation, no softening. Evelyn's expression changed not to fear, but to recognition. "How many?" "2, maybe more." A pause. Then, "Not ours." That clarified everything. Evelyn stood carefully, her movements measured but urgent. "Daniel? I don't know where he is," Maya replied. "We don't have time to find out." The hallway outside shifted again, a door opening, then closing, closer this time. Maya's mind moved fast, cutting through options, eliminating anything that relied on help arriving in time. "We need to move," she said. Evelyn nodded once. "Where?" Maya glanced toward the back of the room. There was a service exit connected to the older part of the house used rarely, mostly forgotten. She had noticed it on her first day. "There," she said, pointing. Evelyn followed her gaze. "That leads outside." "Good," Maya replied. "So do they." Another sound in the hallway. This time, unmistakable. A door handle turning. Maya didn't wait. She moved quickly, crossing the room and opening the hidden panel that led to the narrow service passage behind the walls. It creaked slightly, old hinges but not enough to carry beyond the room. "Go," she said. Evelyn stepped forward without argument. No hesitation. That told Maya everything she needed to know about the woman she was protecting. She wasn't fragile. She was just older. Maya followed, closing the panel behind them just as the main door to the room opened. Voices entered. Low. Controlled. She was here. "Check the bedroom." Maya held her breath, listening. The men moved through the visible space, unaware, at least for now, that the room extended beyond what they could see. The passage was narrow, dimly lit. The air cooler here, carrying the faint scent of dust and wood that hadn't been disturbed in years. Evelyn moved carefully but steadily, one hand brushing lightly against the wall for balance. Maya stayed just behind her, her attention split between guiding Evelyn forward and listening for any sign that they had been discovered. "They're searching," Evelyn whispered. "Yes, for me." Maya didn't answer, because they both knew that already. The passage turned once, then again, leading toward the back of the house where the service exit connected to the outer grounds. Maya pushed the door open slowly, just enough to look outside. Snow, darkness, and no one immediately visible. "We go now," she said. Evelyn stepped out first, the cold hitting immediately, sharp and unforgiving. Maya followed, closing the door behind them. The wind cut through her thin jacket like it wasn't even there. But she didn't feel it. Not yet. Adrenaline had already taken over. "This way," she said, guiding Evelyn along the side of the house, staying close to the shadows, avoiding the main driveway where visibility would be highest. Behind them, somewhere inside the house, a door slammed. Then another. They knew. "Faster," Maya said. Evelyn picked up her pace as much as she could, her breath visible in the cold air. Her steps steady but not as quick as Maya's. Maya adjusted immediately, slowing just enough to stay with her without losing momentum. They reached the edge of the property line, where the trees thickened and the security lights didn't reach as far. Maya paused, listening. Footsteps. Faint, but closing. "They're coming," she said. Evelyn looked at her. "Then we don't stop." Maya nodded. "No, we don't." They moved again, deeper into the shadows, the snow crunching softly beneath their feet, the cold biting harder now as the distance from the house grew. Behind them, the lights of the estate remained steady, unchanged, as if nothing inside it had shifted at all. But Maya knew better. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't a missing watch or a misplaced number. This was escalation, and escalation meant one thing. They weren't just trying to control the narrative anymore. They were trying to remove the threat. And right now, she and Evelyn were the threat. Maya tightened her jaw, her focus sharpening even further. She had seen this before. Not like this, not on this scale. But the pattern was the same, and the rule was simple. You don't wait for it to get worse. You move. You survive. You fight, if you have to. Ahead, The road came into view, faint under the streetlights, empty for the moment. Maya slowed just enough to check both directions. "We get to the road," she said. "Then we find help." Evelyn nodded, her breath steady despite the pace. "And Daniel?" Maya's eyes flicked back toward the house, then forward again. "He'll find us," she said. Not hope, not assumption, just a statement. Because something told her he would. Behind them, the sound of movement grew louder, closer, no longer careful, no longer quiet. They had lost the advantage of stealth. Now it was speed. Maya stepped onto the road, her hand reaching out instinctively to steady Evelyn as they crossed. The cold air burned in her lungs, her muscles tightening with each step. But she didn't slow down. Not now. Not when stopping meant everything ended here. And as they moved into the open, the distance between them and the house growing with every second, one thing became clear in a way that left no room for doubt. This was no longer about what had been hidden. This was about what they were willing to do to keep it that way. And Maya Williams, whether she had chosen it or not, was now standing in the middle of it. Daniel Carter felt it before the call came. Not as a thought. As a break in rhythm, the same one that had been tightening all day, now snapping into something unmistakable. He was in the security room again, reviewing access logs, cross-referencing timestamps with system entries that no longer aligned the way they should. The numbers were beginning to tell a story. Not clean, not complete, but enough to confirm one thing. This wasn't isolated. It was coordinated. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Carter." The voice was controlled, distorted slightly, but not enough to hide intent. "You're running out of time." Daniel didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on the screen in front of him, on the frozen image of a hallway camera that should have been recording live. "Who is this?" "That's not the question you should be asking." A pause. Then, quieter. "Your mother is no longer in the house." The words landed without warning, but Daniel didn't move. Not physically. Inside, everything shifted. Fast. Precise. Calculated. "If you've touched her." "We haven't." The voice cut in. "Yet." Silence stretched between them. Thin and dangerous. "This is where you decide what matters more." The voice continued. "Control or consequences?" The line went dead. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. For half a second, the room held its breath. Then he moved. Fast. Not rushed. Focused. "Pull every external camera feed," he said sharply. "Perimeter, road access, everything." The technician jumped into motion. "We're getting interference," he said almost immediately. "Feeds are dropping." "Then pull backups." "They're looping." Daniel's jaw tightened. Of course they were. This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned. He turned, already moving toward the door. "Lock the house down," he said. "No one in, no one out." "Yes, sir." But Daniel didn't stay to hear the confirmation. He was already gone. Outside, the cold hit him hard, sharp enough to cut through the focus that had taken over his body. He barely felt it. His mind was already ahead, mapping the property, the exits, the blind spots, the places someone could move without being seen if they knew where to look. They knew. That was the problem. They knew the system because they were part of it. His car door slammed shut behind him as he drove straight through the main gate, not waiting for it to open fully before pushing past the narrowing gap. Tires hit snow, sliding slightly before gripping again as he turned onto the road. His phone rang again. This time internal. He answered immediately. "We found movement on the north boundary," the voice said. "Two figures leaving the property on foot." Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. "Describe them." A pause. "One appears to be Miss Carter. The other." Another pause. "Matches Miss Williams." Daniel exhaled once. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. "Track them," he said. "Keep eyes on them." "We're trying. But don't lose them." He ended the call, pushing the car faster, headlights cutting through the dark road ahead. They weren't taken. They had moved. That changed everything. Because it meant Maya had seen it coming. It meant she had acted. And it meant they were still ahead of whatever had been set in motion. On the road, Maya didn't stop moving. Not even when the sound behind them shifted from distant pursuit to something closer, more defined. She adjusted her pace instinctively, guiding Evelyn toward the edge of the road where the tree line broke just enough to offer partial cover. "They're gaining," Evelyn said quietly. Maya nodded. "I know." Her breath burned in her chest now, the cold air cutting deeper with each inhale. But she didn't slow down. Not yet. Not until she had to. Headlights appeared in the distance. Fast. Too fast to be casual. Maya's body tensed immediately. "That's not random," she said. Evelyn followed her gaze. "No." The car closed the distance quickly, its engine cutting through the quiet night. Maya stepped slightly in front of Evelyn, her posture shifting, not protective in a way that blocked, but in a way that prepared. Ready to move. Ready to react. The car slowed, then stopped. The door opened, and Daniel stepped out. The moment held, just long enough for everything to align. Maya didn't relax immediately. She didn't move toward him. She waited. "You're all right," Daniel said, his voice steady but carrying something deeper beneath it. Not control, not authority. Something closer to urgency. "For now," Maya replied. That was enough. Daniel's eyes moved past her to his mother, taking in the cold, the strain, the fact that she was standing here instead of inside the house where she should have been. "We need to move," he said. "They're still out there." Maya nodded once. "We know." A sound behind them, branches shifting, footsteps breaking through the quiet. Closer now. No longer hiding. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Get in the car." This time, Maya moved. Not because he said it, but because it was the right call. She opened the back door, helping Evelyn inside before sliding in after her. Daniel was already back in the driver's seat, the engine roaring as he turned the car sharply, tires biting into the road as they accelerated away from the approaching figures. In the rearview mirror, shadows moved at the edge of the road too far now to catch up. For the moment, silence filled the car, broken only by the sound of the engine and the wind rushing past. Daniel didn't look back. "They were inside," Maya said. Not a question. A statement. Daniel nodded once. "I know." A pause. Then, "They called me." Maya's expression didn't change. Of course they did. Evelyn sat quietly between them, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing steadying as the immediate danger passed, but the weight of what had just happened settling in its place. "This is no longer contained," she said softly. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. "No," he said, "it isn't." Maya looked out the window, the city lights beginning to reappear as they moved further from the estate. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, sharp, and fully aware now of where she stood. This wasn't just something she had stepped into. It was something that had closed around her, and there was no clean way out. Daniel spoke again, his voice lower now, more deliberate. "They made a move." Maya nodded. "Which means we were right." A pause. Then, "And now they know it." The car moved through the night, the distance from the house growing with every second. But the danger hadn't lessened. It had changed. It had stepped out of the shadows. And now, all of them, Maya, Evelyn, and Daniel, were no longer trying to uncover it. They were inside it. And whatever came next wasn't going to be quiet. Daniel didn't drive back to the estate. Not immediately. The decision came fast. Instinct overriding routine in a way he wasn't used to but understood all the same. Going back meant stepping into a space that had already been compromised. And right now, control mattered more than familiarity. The car cut through downtown Chicago, the skyline rising ahead like something solid, something dependable, even if everything beneath it wasn't. Maya noticed the direction shift without asking. She didn't question it. She understood the logic. You don't return to the place that just tried to remove you. You move somewhere they don't expect. Evelyn sat quietly in the back seat, her hands still folded, her breathing steady now, but her eyes sharp, taking in everything without speaking. It wasn't fear that filled the car. It was recalibration. Daniel pulled into a private underground garage beneath one of his corporate buildings, the security gate sliding open after a brief scan. This place was different. Not a home, not a space built for comfort, a place built for control. Cameras, access points, systems he trusted because he had designed them. The car came to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. Then Daniel turned slightly, looking back. "We're safe here," he said. Maya didn't answer right away. She stepped out first, scanning the garage, her eyes moving quickly, mapping exits, blind spots, anything that didn't align. It was cleaner than the house, tighter, but nothing was ever completely secure. Not anymore. She opened the back door for Evelyn, offering her a hand. "Careful." Evelyn accepted it without comment, stepping out into the controlled quiet of the garage. Daniel led them toward a private elevator, his movements sharp, efficient, no wasted motion. The doors closed behind them, the space narrowing as the elevator began to rise. Silence settled again, this time heavier, more grounded. "They had access to internal systems," Daniel said finally, his voice low. "Security feeds were looped. Logs were altered." Maya nodded. "Inside job." "Yes." A pause. Then, and not a small one, Evelyn leaned lightly against the wall, her gaze steady, then stopped treating it like one. The words weren't harsh, but they were clear. Daniel glanced at her, then back ahead. He didn't argue, because he knew she was right. The elevator doors opened into a private floor, minimal staff, controlled access, a space designed for high-level operations. Not comfort, not display, function. Maya stepped out first again, her instincts still leading her movement. She paused just inside, taking in the layout, the angles, the way the space held itself together. "Better," she said quietly. Daniel almost smiled. "Almost. It will do." He moved past her, heading toward a central office space, already pulling up files on a secured system. "We don't have much time," he said. "If they made a move tonight, they're accelerating." Maya followed, her focus locking back onto the situation, the fear from earlier replaced by something sharper, clearer. "Then we move faster." Evelyn took a seat near the window, watching them both, her presence steady, anchoring the room in a way that neither of them acknowledged but both relied on. Daniel pulled up the financial records again, this time cross-referencing them with external audit data that had just begun to come in. The discrepancies were clearer now. Not random, not isolated, structured. "It's layered," he said. "Multiple accounts, shell movements." Maya stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. "And timed," she added. "Each shift covers the last one." Daniel nodded, "Which means whoever built this has been doing it long enough to trust it," Maya finished. Silence settled between them, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was focused, directed. Then Maya said something that shifted everything again. "The watch wasn't random." Daniel looked at her. "No, it was placed," she said, "or removed on purpose." A pause. "To point at me." Evelyn spoke from behind them. "To isolate you." Maya nodded once. "And if that worked," Daniel finished the thought, "you'd be gone before we saw any of this." The realization hit fully now, not as a theory, as a plan that had already been set in motion, and failed, which meant the next move wouldn't be subtle. Daniel straightened slightly, his mind already moving ahead. "Then we stop reacting," he said. Maya glanced at him. "And start choosing," she said, echoing Evelyn's words from earlier. He nodded once. Agreement. Real this time. He turned to another screen, pulling up internal personnel access logs. "We narrow it down," he said. "Access to finance. Access to security. Overlap between the two." Maya leaned in slightly, her eyes scanning the data. "And timing," she added. "Who was where when the logs were altered?" Evelyn watched them both, a faint expression crossing her face. Not pride, not relief. Something quieter. Recognition. They were working together now. Not as employer and staff. Not as authority and outsider. As equals in a situation that required all of them. Daniel stopped on one name, just for a second, then moved past it. But Maya saw it. "Go back," she said. He hesitated, then did. The name reappeared. Richard Hale. The room didn't react, not outwardly, but something beneath it shifted. Final this time. "He has access to both systems," Maya said. Daniel nodded slowly. And the authority to bypass checks. Evelyn's voice came soft, but steady. And the reason? Daniel didn't look at her. What reason? Control, she said. People like that don't just take money. They build systems they can own. Silence followed. Not uncertain. Confirming. Daniel closed the file, his decision already made. We don't confront him yet, he said. Maya shook her head. No. We gather everything, he continued. Every account, every transfer, every person connected to it, Maya added. He nodded. And when we move, Maya finished it. We don't miss. Evelyn leaned back slightly in her chair, her hands resting calmly now. That's the difference between reacting and choosing, she said. The room held that. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Cars, lights, people unaware of the shift happening just above them. Inside, something had locked into place. The fear from earlier had burned away. What remained was clarity, direction, and something stronger than either. Resolve. Daniel looked at Maya one last time. You didn't have to stay in this. Maya met his gaze. Neither did you. A pause. Then, quietly. But here we are, and for the first time since this began, there was no distance between them. Not in status, not in perspective. Just two people standing in the same truth, knowing exactly what had to be done next. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, the plan was no longer a plan. It was a structure tight, deliberate, and built on something stronger than suspicion. Evidence. Daniel hadn't slept. Maya hadn't either. The hours between midnight and morning had been spent pulling threads, and every thread they pulled led back to the same place. Richard Hale. Not as a guess. Not as a theory. As a pattern that repeated too cleanly to ignore. Transfers routed through shell accounts that existed just long enough to disappear. Security logs overwritten at precise intervals. Access points that aligned with his schedule, his authority, his reach. It wasn't just control. It was design. Maya stood near the window, watching the city wake up in slow, indifferent motion. Cars moving. Lights shifting. People stepping into routines that had nothing to do with what was happening here. For a moment, she let herself feel the distance between that world and this one. Then she let it go. He's not acting alone, she said. Daniel didn't look up from the screen in front of him. No. Someone had to help with the security side. I've already flagged 2 names, he replied, his tone steady, precise, both with elevated access, both connected to Hale's internal approvals. Maya nodded slowly. Then it's not just money. Daniel finally looked up. It never was. Evelyn sat across the room, her presence quiet but constant, listening, absorbing, measuring. Money is just the surface, she said. What matters is what it buys. Maya turned slightly toward her. Control, she said again. Evelyn nodded. And silence. That word settled deeper than the others, because silence meant people knew, and chose not to speak. Daniel closed one file and opened another, this one pulling up communication logs. We move today, he said. Not a suggestion. A decision. Maya crossed her arms lightly. How? We bring it into the open, he said. Board level. Maya frowned slightly. That's risky. So is waiting, Daniel replied. If we give him time, he'll start closing gaps, cleaning trails. A pause. We don't give him that chance. Evelyn watched him closely. And you're ready to do that? Daniel met her gaze. I'm ready to end it. The room held that for a moment. Then Maya nodded once. Then we do it clean. Daniel stood, already moving. Emergency board meeting. 1 hour. He picked up his phone, issuing instructions with the same precision he brought to everything else. But this time, there was something different beneath it. Not just control, purpose. Within the hour, the conference room filled. Senior executives, legal advisors, board members who had been pulled out of their schedules with no explanation beyond urgency. The air in the room was tight, expectant. Richard Hale was already there when Daniel entered. Of course he was. Standing near the head of the table, reviewing documents, his posture as composed as ever. He looked up as Daniel walked in, his expression unchanged. Daniel, he said. I wasn't aware we had. Sit down, Daniel interrupted. The room went still. That wasn't how these meetings started. Not with him. Richard paused for half a second. Then he sat. Maya stood near the back of the room. Not at the table. Not part of the formal structure, but present in a way that couldn't be ignored. Evelyn entered last, taking a seat without a word. Daniel didn't waste time. We have a breach, he said. No introduction. No softening. Internal. Financial and operational. A murmur moved through the room. Controlled, but immediate. Richard didn't react. Not outwardly. We've identified irregularities in multiple accounts, Daniel continued. Structured transfers. Systematic manipulation of reporting. He tapped the screen in front of him, and the data appeared clear, undeniable. Patterns highlighted. Connections drawn. Silence fell as the room processed it. This is preliminary, Daniel said. But it's enough. One of the board members leaned forward. Enough for what? Daniel's gaze shifted, landing directly on Richard. Enough to act. The room followed his line of sight, and for the first time, something changed in Richard Hale's expression. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. The moment had arrived. This is a serious accusation, Richard said calmly. You're presenting incomplete data. No. Maya's voice cut in. Not loud, but clear enough to carry across the room. Every eye turned to her. Daniel didn't stop her. That was the first signal. Maya stepped forward slightly, her posture steady, her voice controlled. He's not wrong, she said. It is incomplete. A pause. Then, but it's consistent. She pointed to the screen. The same pattern repeats across multiple accounts. The same timing. The same adjustments. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. And you are? Maya didn't look away. Someone you tried to remove before this got here. That landed. Harder than anything else so far. The room shifted again. Daniel spoke before Richard could respond. Security logs confirm access points aligned with these entries, he said. And those logs were altered. A legal advisor leaned forward. Altered by whom? Daniel didn't hesitate. Someone with full system access. Another pause. Then, quieter. Like our CFO. Silence. Absolute now. Richard let out a slow breath, leaning back slightly in his chair. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he smiled. Not wide, not defensive, controlled. If you're going to accuse me, he said, you'll need more than patterns and speculation. Daniel stepped forward. We have more. He nodded once, and the door opened. 2 federal agents stepped into the room. The shift was immediate, irreversible. Richard's expression changed for the first time. Subtle, but real. We've been working with federal investigators, Daniel said. Independent audit. External verification. The lead agent stepped forward. Richard Hale, he said. His voice firm, official. You are under investigation for financial fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The room held its breath. Richard didn't move. For a second. Then his eyes shifted not to Daniel, not to the agents, to Maya. And in that look, everything that had been hidden finally surfaced. Not denial, not surprise. Recognition. You saw it. Maya held his gaze, unflinching. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. Because the system he had built, the one designed to hide everything, had been broken by the one person he had never accounted for. Not someone powerful. Not someone inside his world. Someone he thought didn't belong in it at all. The agent stepped forward. And this time, Richard Hale didn't resist. The room didn't exhale when Richard Hale was taken away. It held its breath, because everyone there understood something most people never had to face. Removing one man didn't end what he had built. It exposed it. The agents moved with quiet efficiency, guiding Richard toward the door. Their presence controlled, procedural, final. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. But just before he crossed the threshold, he stopped. Not long. Not enough to break their grip. Just enough to turn his head slightly. His eyes found Daniel first, then Evelyn, and finally Maya. There was no anger in that look. No panic. Just something colder. something that carried a message without words. This isn't over. Then, he was gone. The door closed behind him, and the room shifted, but not into relief, into realization. One of the board members stood abruptly. "How far does this go?" he asked. No one answered immediately, because no one knew. Daniel stepped forward, his posture firm, his voice steady. "We assume it goes further than we've seen," he said, "which means we don't stop here." The legal team was already moving, gathering documents, issuing instructions. Phones came out, messages were sent. The machine was turning now, fast, precise, and unforgiving. But Maya wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the door, at the space Richard had just walked through. Something in her chest hadn't settled. Not because of fear, because of instinct. "He wasn't surprised," she said quietly. Daniel glanced at her. No, he knew this was coming. A pause, which means he prepared for it. That landed differently, because preparation didn't end when someone got caught. It extended beyond them, into systems, into people, into contingency. Evelyn spoke, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Then what we saw wasn't the whole structure." Maya nodded slowly. "No, it was the part he was willing to lose." Silence. Heavy. Precise. Daniel turned back to the table, pulling up the remaining files. "We start pulling everything connected to him," he said. "Accounts, communications, personnel. Already in progress," one of the advisors replied. But Maya shook her head slightly. "That's not enough." Daniel looked at her. "Why?" She stepped closer, her voice steady, grounded in something deeper than logic alone. "Because people like him don't build systems that collapse when they fall," she said. "They build systems that keep running." The room went still again. "Then we find who's still running it," Daniel said. Maya met his gaze. "And we do it before they disappear." That shifted everything again. Because now the timeline wasn't open. It was closing. Fast. One of the agents stepped back into the room, his expression focused. "We've secured Hale," he said. "But we're already seeing movement." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What kind of movement?" "Accounts closing," the agent replied. "Transfers accelerating. Someone's trying to clean up." There it was, the second wave. Not reaction. Execution. Maya didn't hesitate. "They're burning it," she said. "Everything they can before it's traced." Daniel turned to the screen, watching as numbers began to shift in real time. Accounts draining. Routes changing. Patterns breaking apart. "Can we track it?" he asked. The agent shook his head slightly. "Not fast enough if they keep this pace." Maya stepped closer to the screen, her eyes moving quickly, following the movement not as isolated data, but as behavior. "They're not just moving money," she said. "They're signaling." Daniel looked at her. "To who?" Maya pointed to one of the sequences. "This isn't random," she said. "It's structured. Same pattern, same timing, just faster." A pause. "They're telling whoever's left to shut down." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, "Which means there is someone left." "Yes," Maya said, "and they're still inside." That word settled deeper than anything else. Inside. Not gone. Not external. Still within reach. Daniel straightened, his focus sharpening again. "Lock internal systems," he said. "Full access freeze. No transfers without direct authorization." The room moved immediately. Commands issued. Systems adjusted. But Maya didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the screen. Something wasn't right. Not in the pattern. In the absence of one. "Stop," she said suddenly. The room paused. Daniel looked at her. "What?" She stepped closer, pointing again, but this time at what wasn't there. "This account," she said. "It hasn't moved." Daniel frowned. "So? Everything else is being cleared," Maya said. "Everything. Except that." A pause. Then, "Why would they leave one?" Silence. Then, understanding. Daniel's expression changed. "Because it's not part of the cleanup," he said. Maya nodded. "It's the control." Evelyn's voice came soft, but certain. "The one they still need." Daniel turned back to the system, pulling up the account in question. "Who has access?" The response came quickly. Limited authorization. High-level clearance only. Daniel's jaw tightened. Names. A pause. Then, Hale. And one other. The room held its breath. Who? Daniel asked. The answer appeared on the screen. And this time, the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was sharp. Because now, they weren't looking at a system anymore. They were looking at a person. And whoever that person was, they hadn't run. They were still here. And that meant one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. The name on the screen didn't cause an outburst. It didn't need to. It landed in the room like something precise and irreversible, cutting clean through every remaining doubt. Daniel didn't speak right away. He just stared at it, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if seeing the past few days rearrange themselves in real time. Every conversation, every access point, every moment that had felt just slightly off. It had all been there, hidden in plain sight. One of the senior board members, not loud, not visible, not someone who demanded attention, which, Maya realized immediately, was exactly the point. He stayed quiet, she said. Daniel nodded once, because he didn't need to move until now. Evelyn's voice came calm, steady. And now he has to decide whether to run or fight. The room shifted again, this time into something sharper, more dangerous, because now they weren't chasing a pattern. They were confronting a person who knew the system as well as Daniel did. Maybe better. Where is he? Daniel asked. The response came quickly from the system team. Last access was internal, still inside the building. That was all Daniel needed. He turned immediately, already moving. Lock this floor, he said. No one leaves. Maya followed without hesitation. This wasn't something she stepped into anymore. She was already inside it. The hallway outside the conference room felt different now. Not quiet. Tense. Every door suddenly a question. Every shadow something that might move. Daniel moved fast but controlled, his focus narrowing with every step. He knew this building. Every exit. Every blind spot. Every place someone could disappear if they had enough time. The question was whether that time was already gone. He won't go far, Maya said, as they moved. Daniel glanced at her. Why? Because he doesn't think he has to, she replied. Not yet. That made sense. People like that didn't run immediately. They calculated. They waited for the right moment, which meant they were still in the middle of that calculation, and that gave them a window. They reached the executive offices. Empty at first glance. Too empty. Doors closed. Lights off in places that should have been active. Daniel slowed slightly, his instincts adjusting. Careful, he said. Maya nodded. She didn't need the warning. She already felt it. The wrongness in the air. The way the space held itself too still. Then, a sound. Faint. From the end of the hallway. A door closing. Daniel moved immediately, his pace accelerating. Maya followed, her attention sharp, her body ready for whatever came next. They reached the final office. The door was slightly ajar. Daniel pushed it open. The room was empty, but not untouched. The desk drawer open, files missing, a laptop still warm. He was here, Daniel said. Maya stepped inside, her eyes moving quickly across the room. Then she saw it. The screen, still active, a transfer in progress. He's not running, she said. Daniel followed her gaze. The numbers on the screen were moving. Fast, not scattered like before. Focused, everything being funneled into one final route. He's finishing it, Daniel said. Maya nodded. And then he'll disappear. A pause. Then, quietly, unless we stop it. Daniel stepped forward, his hands already moving across the system, trying to cut the transfer. But the response came back immediately. Locked out. He's still connected, Daniel said. Remote override. Maya looked around the room again. Not at the obvious. At the details. The things people missed when they focused on screens. Then she saw it. A second door. Slightly open. Not the main exit. A private access point. He's not remote, she said. Daniel turned. What? He's here, Maya said. He didn't leave. That was the moment everything shifted again. Daniel moved toward the second door, pushing it open without hesitation. The smaller room beyond was dim, the lights off, the space tight and functional. And there he was, standing by a secondary terminal, his hand still on the controls. He didn't look surprised, not even now. He turned slowly, his expression calm, almost thoughtful. "You found it faster than I expected," he said. Daniel stepped forward, his voice cold, controlled. "It's over." The man smiled slightly, not mocking, not afraid, just certain. "No," he said. "It's just changing hands." Maya stepped into the room beside Daniel, her presence steady, unshaken. "You're done," she said. The man's eyes shifted to her. For a moment, something flickered there. Recognition. The same look Richard had given her. "You," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to matter." Maya held his gaze. "Yeah," she said. "I get that a lot." A pause. Then she stepped closer, her voice firm, cutting through whatever control he thought he still had. "Shut it down." The man hesitated. Just for a second, but that was enough. Daniel moved immediately, overriding the system manually, cutting the final transfer before it completed. The screen froze, then went dark. Silence filled the room, not heavy this time. Final. The man didn't move, didn't resist, because he knew it was done. Security arrived seconds later, the door opening behind them, the situation already resolved before they stepped in. As they took him away, he didn't look back. Not at Daniel, not at Evelyn, who now stood quietly in the doorway. He looked at Maya, and for the first time, there was something different in his expression. Not control, not certainty, something closer to understanding. Then he was gone. The room settled, the system stabilized. The threat real, immediate, dangerous, had been stopped. Daniel stood there for a moment, his hands resting lightly against the edge of the desk, his breath steadying. Then he looked at Maya. Really looked this time, not as an unknown, not as a variable, as something else entirely. "You saw it," he said. Maya shook her head slightly. "I paid attention." Evelyn stepped forward, her hand resting briefly on the back of the chair. "That's how truth works," she said. "It doesn't shout. A pause. Then, softer, it waits, until someone is willing to see it." The room held that, not as tension, as resolution. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of what had almost been lost beneath its surface. Inside, the system had been broken and rebuilt, not by power, not by control, but by something far simpler, someone who didn't belong, and saw everything anyway.